Please take your seats and silence your phones. The session will begin shortly. Please welcome to the stage Celine Coggins.
Hello, everybody. My name is Celine Coggins. Welcome. So great to see so many faces in the audience, especially because I know that Matt Damon is in the other room. So really, really appreciate all of you. So let me just introduce myself real briefly. I'm the Executive Director of Grantmakers for Education. We're a US-based network of education grantmakers, about 300 in total. I'm also an expert in residence at the Harvard University iLab, where I coach aspiring social entrepreneurs, some of the folks who are building the ed tech solutions of the future for all of us. So the title of our session is Education on the Move, How We Can Harness a Shift to Online Learning to Reduce Disparities in Access to Education. So just a few opening words. The pandemic forced an important and positive and universal mind shift. Every educator, every parent, every government leader came to recognize that it's possible to be doing far more with technology to advance access to learning across the globe. So where do we go from here? That's the question of our panel today. If technology can enable learning anywhere, what does the role of the teacher become? If technology can enable learning anywhere, do we just need to accept the downsides of technology, especially like kids' mental health? If technology can enable learning anywhere, how do we ensure that technology is a tool for reducing inequity, not growing inequity? So we're going to have a great panel to talk about this today. And we're going to have some time for table talk. So we're excited to get all of you in on the conversation. At this time, I was planning to introduce someone new to share our commitments to action. And just a minute ago, I learned that I was going to be reintroducing myself to share our commitments to action. So there's a lot to read, and so I hope I'm going to do a good job. I'd like to invite up Farhad Ashgar from the Education Strategy Group and Kyle Hartung of Jobs for the Future to do our first commitment to action. Yes. Oh, it says education. Okay. And the Carnegie Corporation of New York. Okay. So let me share a little bit about what's going on with this commitment to action. Our educational systems are marked by inequities in access, persistence, and success. Although we've made incremental improvements in attainment of post-secondary degrees and credentials in the last decade, progress remains slow and inconsistent, particularly for students of color and those experiencing poverty. The COVID-19 pandemic especially impacted those with a high school degree or less, as their means of earning a living was curtailed. It also contributed to a growing education gap, as students of color and those from low-income backgrounds had fewer resources available to help them make up for lost school time. College and career pathways are effective at lifting people out of economic hardship and building generational wealth, but access to them remains elusive for so many. Throughout our country, too few students have access to credentials with labor market currency, and many who enroll in post-secondary programs do not finish them, contributing to a vicious cycle of inequity and poverty. Today, a leading group of funders dedicated to driving economic and social mobility in our country, including the Walton Family Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, the Joyce Foundation, and Bloomberg Philanthropies, are partnering with 5 national organizations with deep expertise in designing, transforming, and scaling quality college and career pathways, including the Education Strategy Group, Jobs for the Future, Excel in Ed, Advanced CTE, and New America. Together, they are embarking upon a shared commitment to address the inequities to pathways to success, persistence, and access in the United States. This commitment will provide the capacity building and technical assistance to partnerships between state education agencies, local school districts, post-secondary institutions, and other organizations to drive systems change that supports, expands, and sustains strong college and career pathways, especially for Black, Latinx, first-generation college goers, and students experiencing poverty. Findings and lessons learned will be disseminated through an initiative website, broad communications, and national presentations to improve similar efforts across the country. This ambitious partnership will build and sustain equitable systems that enable all students, especially historically marginalized ones, and those disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, to advance their educations and careers on equal footing. Thank you both. Let me pass you. All right, now I'd like to call Laura Dunn of the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. Young people are particularly vulnerable to a variety of mental and behavioral health challenges, as their judgment and decision-making abilities are still a work in progress. I have teens, I know. Impulsivity is the hallmark of adolescence. Suicide is the 12th leading cause of death in the United States, but the second leading cause of death for teenagers, and the numbers are on the rise. According to recent data, nearly 20% of high school students report serious thoughts of suicide, and 9% of them have made attempts. As is true for adults, risk factors including psychiatric disorders and various circumstantial factors. Teens who are or feel isolated are also particularly susceptible to thoughts of and acts of self-harm. And unfortunately, the forced social deprivation imposed by the COVID pandemic has served to exacerbate the problem. In Arkansas, the behavioral health crisis among the young has reached alarming levels, and yet youth health care there is extremely limited. Most counties in Arkansas have no practicing child psychiatrists, and in those that do, the numbers are inadequate. Particularly for young people in the most remote areas and those with complex health needs, substance abuse or trauma histories, healthcare needs remain persistently unmet. The teen suicide rate is the 4th highest in the country. Today, the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences and its partners are committing to address this urgent healthcare gap through prevention, access, and treatment initiatives. They will identify the areas with the highest behavioral health care unmet needs and develop a digital platform that young people can use to self-assess their need for services. When clinical interventions are indicated, teens will be navigated to appropriate local or regional services directly through the digital platform. This commitment will provide for training of 750 healthcare professionals, specifically in evidence-based models of behavioral healthcare for children and teens. We know that mental and behavioral challenges are serious public health problems among all age groups. The toll on productivity and well-being is enormous, but we also know that medical intervention, clinical care, and family and community support make a meaningful difference. Thank you, Laura. All right. This person was going to invite me back to the stage, so let me just get my bearings for 1 second. All right. So now we're going to move on to our panel discussion. I'd like to invite my panelists to the stage. First of all, I would like to invite Sherry Weston, President of Sesame Workshop. I'd like to invite Shariwa Sean Benjamin, who's the founder and the CTO of It's Learnable. Okay. And we have one more panelist who will be joining us on stage in a moment, Jaime Saavedra, who's the Global Director of Education for the World Bank. All right. Are these on? Okay, great. Hello, folks. I think what would be great is if we could just start by having each of you introduce yourselves and say a couple of sentences about the challenge that you're working on.
All right, thank you very much for inviting me here, and I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to attend the CGI event as well as be a part of this conversation. But first and foremost, I would like to make it clear that I'm on a panel with some very amazing people, and I want to just make it very, very clear that I don't want to posture as someone with decades of experience in education, but as a software engineer, I want to posture as someone with decades of experience in technology and is working hard to fix and upskill their community and solve problems by using technology. So my bio says, I unlock Africa's potential through technology, and that's my main goal, and that's what I've been focusing on. And I'm working with the African Union and with the World Economic Forum, and I'm very grateful for their support, and we hope to continue to fix the education space in Africa and make it accessible and democratized for everyone going forward.
Thank you. Sure. You have every right to be up here. You're probably going to steal the show. But I am Sherry Weston, and as mentioned, I'm president of Sesame Workshop, which is the nonprofit organization that produces Sesame Street around the world. And the challenge we're trying to address, if you think of Sesame's origins, it was created 53 years ago as an experiment to see if you could use TV to help reach children who didn't have the same access to quality early learning to help put them on a path to arrive at school ready to learn. So I have to say, I think the need for Sesame has never been greater. A global pandemic, 100 million people displaced. So the challenge that we are addressing is trying to use the power of media to reach children, especially those children who are displaced and affected by conflict, to provide that valuable early education in those critical early years.
That's great. So Sherry, why don't you go on? So you mentioned 400 million students or young people who have been affected by violence in their areas, 35 million around the world forcibly displaced. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing for refugee children.
Okay, I'd be delighted. Well, first of all, I think the most important thing is to understand, and I'm sure many people in here do, but why those first 5 years are so important, right? It's when a child's brain develops faster than any other time. So we know if we reach them in those critical early years, we have the greatest return on investment. We also know from the brain science that if children experience severe stress, prolonged exposure to trauma that it literally inhibits brain development. It changes their brain architecture. So imagine how stressful it must be to be displaced, to be in conflict settings. And yet, the good news is that there is so much research on the fact that we can help mitigate that stress. We can help put them on a path to succeed if we reach them with quality early childhood interventions. So what I see as the great irony is when you think of, well, less than 2% of all humanitarian aid goes to early childhood. So if you think about it, those young children have the most to lose because of the time in their development that they're experiencing this. They also have the most to gain because we know we can mitigate that, and yet they receive the least. So really what Sesame is doing is partnering with amazing organizations, the International Rescue Committee, BRAC, so many organizations around the world, and we have great partners and funders like MacArthur and Lego and Hilton and others, but we're partnering with those who do direct services on the ground, and then we're creating what we do best, which is localized content that really reflects a child's reality, that has a very deep research and curriculum to help them overcome trauma, the social emotional learning. And then if you think of it as surround sound, we provide that content. It's not just broadcast, it's WhatsApp, it's YouTube, it's digital, it's any way we could reach them. And then we work with our partners so that they also have the content through storybooks, through curricular, through little handheld devices, like every way we can use, but they're empowered with that content for much more hands-on direct services, home visits, learning centers. So I won't go on, but it's designed to try to meet, to reach children at scale, but also to have really direct contact with the most vulnerable children and families.
And do you track how many countries your students can access you in?
Sure. I mean, we can show, Sesame's in over 150 countries, but the work I'm talking about is not the Sesame Street US show. It's when we go in and create completely localized content, starting with needs assessment, with local educators, with research on the ground, because we believe children learn best when they see themselves. So the characters will be local, the content, the culture. So it's, I can still tell you that even though the Syrian response is developed for Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan, and Syria, because we also use, satellite, it's seen in 12 Middle Eastern countries, right? So, we'll have farther reach, but these are ones where we're really trying to target those countries where there's the greatest need and the greatest number of displaced children.
Fantastic. That's great. Sean, let's move on to you. You said that projects to help poor and vulnerable communities ideally need to be self-sustaining with input from communities themselves. Tell us how that looks in your work.
So if you look at the 3 stages of the digital divide, you have infrastructure. This is where companies and telcos create that connectivity, and governments come in and maybe provide free Wi-Fi and etc. And then you have the second stage, which is the usability. Once you have all that connectivity, what are you going to do with it? Are you just going to be on WhatsApp, or are you just going to be, taking selfies and sending pictures? And that's stage number 2. And then stage number 3 is the actual inclusion, right? Do you have people that know how to use the infrastructure meaningfully? And that's where our application plays in. Our application is called It's Learnable. It's basically a teacher-focused mobile application and desktop application that allows teachers from any background to use technology to create digital online lessons without the need of, very, very fast bandwidth, without the need of a very, very expensive device, right, like a computer. They can create material on their phone. Once they've created that material, they can use the same infrastructure to send that material to their learners via multiple inclusive channels, right? This includes the mobile web. This includes our dedicated mobile application. This also includes WhatsApp, right? Because WhatsApp is very, very good at compressing data and very, very good at sending out data very, very quickly. And a lot of Africans are already on WhatsApp. And the fourth one is what is called Data Free. It's a platform that allows us to send material to anyone around South Africa without the need of having data on their phone. So depending on what stage you're at the in the inclusion divide, will depend what you need to implement to get to the next level, to have people included. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. So Sherry, I want to go back to you and have you go a little bit deeper. So you're working with young people who are in refugee situations. Talk about how you approach that work, recognizing that the students, the young people are children of trauma.
Well, I think the most important thing for children who are experiencing traumatic experiences or severe stress is more engagement with a caring adult, what's called nurturing care. So much of the work we do is also working really closely with the parents and caregivers. And if you think of how stressed they themselves are, what we do is we give them tools, we give them resources, but a lot of the direct services also reach out to those parents and caregivers. So while you're doing home visits and you're showing them content, it may be on WhatsApp, it may be printed materials, but you're helping give them tools for children, but also coach them in the process so that they're getting support. And if you think about what we create, I think people think of Sesame Street as it's always for the child, but it deliberately appeals to adults. Always has. That's why we had celebrities and musicians and humor, because the thought was that the learning would be deeper if a parent or adult were engaged with the child at the same time. So much of this is created to be a catalyst for more engagement between adult and child. And I would say the other thing that I think is so interesting, we started our work really focused on children affected by crisis about 5-6 years ago in the Syrian response region. And then we had moved on to Bangladesh, the Rohingya crisis, East Africa, Latin America, most recently Afghanistan and Ukraine. We always start with research and needs assessments. And what we found is children affected by crisis, experiencing trauma, every time in each of these needs assessment, the needs are the same. What they need in terms of nurturing care, in terms of playful learning, those social and emotional tools that can help them overcome these challenges and build resilience are the same. The contexts are very different, and to your point, the ways we might be able to get to them are vastly different in the Middle East, from Cox's Bazar, from migrants on the move in Latin America. So we're having to learn to be really flexible and really innovative, both high-tech and low-tech. Mm-hmm. But again, the needs of those children are completely consistent. It's just how do we deliver it?
Mm-hmm. That's great. Sean, I want to allow you to go on here too and go a little bit deeper into its learnable. So you described a little bit about what a teacher can do. Talk about this learner experience. Many of us grew up in a four-wall classroom with a bunch of desks in a row and a teacher. So this is Education on the Move. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
So I think it's also very important to note that when it comes to Africa and the demographics in Africa, the resource spectrum is very, very wide. And the gap between people that have resources, you have people that have resources on one side, right, that come from maybe affluent backgrounds, and then you have people that don't have resources on the other side, that come from very, very underfunded schools and not so affluent backgrounds. So the gap between those is very, very wide, and the people on the right, even before COVID-19, they've been inundated by a lot of problems, right? So this can be anything from things like not having clean water, not having proper toilets, not having textbooks in classes, right? Because they're so expensive to print and so expensive to distribute. And you find that when COVID-19 came, the same communities were also inundated by an additional problem, which was now it's illegal to go to school. You have to stay at home and you can't leave your house. So you need to find a device, teach yourself how to teach online, and your learners need to know how to learn via the same digital tools in a very, very short period of time. So our application, what it seeks to do is, what it is doing is, we're upskilling the teacher. Instead of trying to upskill the student first, we're upskilling the teacher for two reasons. To allow teachers to be part of the fourth industrial revolution and not be left behind, because we still want employable individuals in the next couple of years who are teachers who are very, very good at what they're doing. And secondly, to allow the same teachers to send their material via unsophisticated and very easy to use channels, right? These are the ones that I highlighted earlier, and they also need to be very, very affordable. So once the teachers create the content on our platform, they can just enter this child's phone number or the child's ID, and immediately the child gets a notification to say, like, look, there's a download waiting for you. You can start learning from that. And also, I need to point out that we're not saying that schools are of the past, right? That people should just stop going to school and everyone can just learn from home. We are trying to implement a more blended approach where anything that's missing from that physical learning experience, you can actually replace with something that's digital, right? Because if you look at people that are learning from hard copy books, which is a lot of the African demographic, a lot of people are still learning from hard copy books, right? And that's very, very expensive. Oxford every single year adds 2 words into their dictionary. Imagine throwing away a book every single year because there were 2 words added to it and buying a new one, right? It's unmanageable. So by allowing people to learn digitally, you also allow them to learn via updated content that's very, very easy to edit and that's up to date and very relevant to what they're learning from. Yeah.
Thanks so much. And I want to welcome to the stage Jaime Saavedra, who is the Global Education Director at the World Bank. We're so glad to have you with us.
I told him I'd already given all his. He's good to go.
Exactly. Would you like to start by introducing yourself and saying a little bit more about your work?
So apologies, first of all, and I think I can leave because I'm sure I said everything probably already. And well, my name is Jaime Saavedra. I'm now the Global Director for Education at the World Bank. Before I was Minister of Education of my country, of Peru. And so what's my work? If I can summarize it, it's basically trying to make sure that all children and youth have a quality and decent education and that can learn with joy, with purpose, with rigor, and that's a huge challenge that we have. We had a learning crisis before the pandemic. Now we have a gigantic learning crisis after this disaster. And I think a critical job for us today is to make sure that everyone internalize the magnitude of the challenge that we have. Right? It's a gigantic problem in front of us, and we really need to tackle it with a sense of urgency.
Jaime, I'm going to give you one question, and then we'll circle back to everyone else. But the pandemic, as you just emphasized, has resulted in a dramatic loss of learning, absenteeism for students, mental health challenges, staff shortages among teachers and other educators. How do you think about this recovery process? Where are the priorities? What are the things that you are thinking about across the globe?
So I think the first issue is the recognition that we have a problem. And unfortunately, that's a very important step because we don't see that recognition everywhere. There are some countries who really understand that they cannot do what they were doing, just go back and do what they were doing before the pandemic. They have to recognize that the children that they are receiving today have much more challenges. Teachers are receiving a 5th grader that might have the competencies of a 4th or a 3rd or a 2nd grader. So many teachers will have de facto a multi-grade class, right, in front of them. And that's very difficult. It's very difficult to handle. It was always very difficult. So the first point is to recognize that that's the problem and something must be done. Some countries are doing a package of interventions, right, of reducing prioritizing the curriculum, trying to get more effective time of teaching, either changing the days of vacation, putting remedial education, providing teachers with different types and methods to do adaptive learning, or if teachers are of more lower quality, to give them structured pedagogy. So there is an array of interventions, and we have them. Right, and many of them are proven. So the challenge that we have is not the availability of tools or methods to help teachers. The problem is not that. The problem is the political will, right, to implement those methods at scale within countries. That is the main challenge. So some people say, well, the issue is that we need more money. And yes, of course, we always need more money in education. Actually, many low and middle income countries are spending too little. But even if you throw money today, that doesn't mean that there will be a change if there is not a political understanding of what has to be done, and if you don't give them the right tools to manage not the normal times, but the extraordinary times that we're living today, in which kids have to recover of 2 years. That in many countries it's 2 years that they've been completely disconnected from the school environment. So they're receiving kids also with with much more mental challenges and mental health problems that they would have had otherwise. So this is a huge opportunity sometimes to do things that we should have done before, right? But now we are like, for me, it's like there's a fire there, right? And we need to combat the fire. We need to have that attitude, that engagement. And that's my worry, that we're not seeing that everywhere.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to bring it back to Sherry and Sean. So Jaime just mentioned a couple of things that drive the social sector. One is impact, and the other is scale. So can you talk a little bit about your work and how you think about impact and scale? I'll go to you first, Sherry.
Yes, but first off, I would also like to thank Jaime because he really has been such a champion for education, including early childhood development, and made it a cornerstone of the World Bank, and we owe you a debt of gratitude for that. But I would say that,
Which, just an interruption, which, by the way, disappeared from the planet
No,
for almost
understand.
2 years.
Yes.
Early childhood
Right.
education disappeared from the
Disappeared.
planet.
Well, and again, as I mentioned earlier, there's so much research that says how important it is for us to reach children from the get-go in those early years, or we're not putting them on a path where the other education can make the same difference, particularly those who are the most vulnerable. But I would say two things. One of the things we're doing with we were fortunate to have MacArthur Foundation funding to create the largest early childhood intervention in humanitarian response when we started in the Syrian response region with the IRC, and then to go ahead to Cox's Bar with Bangladesh because of LEGO. But the reason I mention it is we are taking $30 million of those two grants and investing it in education with NYU Global Ties, because we think it's one of the most important deliverables. Obviously, we want these to become models that we can learn from, iterate, and make sure that they can be used regardless of where children are in crisis, to be adapted easily. But I think that research is going to be so important because we want to be able to prove what works, what's most effective for children in crisis settings, and we want to share what doesn't. Because I think we have a better chance of convincing the powers that be why it is so important to invest in reaching the youngest children when we respond to crises, if we can prove outcomes. And the scale part, I would just say, another thing that we feel very strongly is, if you add media, you can add scale, and we're reaching 12 million children in the Middle East. But we also have all of the research on the direct services and outcomes and the combination of the learning they get from mass media content as well as direct outcomes from interventions. So what we hope to do as we are working from one setting to another, right now we have a Hilton grant that is both in Colombia and Uganda, is create all of these programs with a mind toward it being more adaptable. The most recent content we've created, we've tested in 11 different countries, because even though it's being designed for this particular crisis, if we know that it's going to be effective and easily adapted, it's what we now call Welcome Sesame from Ahlan Simpson Beyond, is we will be able to be far more nimble, far more flexible, and hopefully that allows philanthropy and others to invest in systems that can be easily scaled.
Want to take a shot at impact and scale?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Thanks.
I'd love to. So one of the first things when it comes to scaling, especially, well, rather from our context, right, is that we are constantly fixing our software. We're constantly reiterating it based on feedback from teachers and making sure that it actually fits the market, because you can't scale something that people find useless or that people just can't use in the first place, right? So the first thing that we set out to do is to make something that's amazing and very useful for teachers, and not just any teachers, but teachers from poorer communities in Africa. Once we've done that, the second thing is that we wanted to the most important thing for us was focusing on doing what we do best. initially, when we started making our software, we wanted to, have our own content creating studio. We have teacher sessions in our office where we train teachers how to use the application. But the unfortunate thing about that is, once you are in a very fast-paced environment, like in a startup building a piece of software, your communication tends to break down. And there's a certain character trait. I forgot what it's called, but it's very common with people that are very good with children. And teachers have that character trait. It means that they are very good at being patient and allowing someone to learn something before they get, frustrated at them not knowing how to use a certain piece of software, right? So how we solved that was by allowing teachers to teach other teachers. We stopped teaching teachers internally and said, look, you guys know what you do best. We're not going to have anyone internally from our team to teach. We're going to outsource and ask teachers to just take over that and teach other teachers and part with that knowledge amongst themselves. Yeah.
That's great. Good lesson. That's really interesting. Jaime, I want to come back to you. You were at the UN Transforming Education Summit earlier in this week. Could you talk about some of the takeaways for that?
So I think one takeaway is that maybe we have made at least one step, right, in this understanding of the magnitude of the crisis, because at least this was not a education summit for people working on education, but an education summit in which people from the broader political spectrum and from the overall development policy arena were there, including heads of states, including heads of government, etc. So that is useful, because the challenge that I think is that we have in education is that we talk too much about people who work in education, and the key thing for me is that we need to talk more with ministers of planning, with ministers of finance, right, so that they have a better understanding that they need to develop that social contract that is needed in order to fund adequately education. I'm talking here domestically. What we see budgets on education. Your budget for education, I've been in the other side of the table, is, okay, your budget is the budget of last year plus 3%, if you're lucky, right? Or whatever was left, right? What we don't do is a good programming of saying, okay, this is the minimum amount of money that I need to give that minimum bundle of interventions that would generate learning. So this is the minimum that I need for each child, and then multiply by the number of children I have, right? And that will tell me, okay, this is how much I need if what I want is to make sure that all children at least have the fundamental skills, at least that. Right, and and then you need to add to that what you need to invest in vocational training, what you need to invest in tertiary education. So having a budget created from the bottom up, defining what are the minimums that you need to comply with that human right that is education. Right, we're not asking for something luxurious, right? We are asking for something that it's our moral obligation. So we don't necessarily are doing that, and hope that that this summit is a step towards that. And this summit the other takeaway, there are many, but the other thing is that I think we are starting to have that balance on two things. One is that we need to focus on the outcome. It's not an issue of saying the tablet, the textbook, the curriculum, paying teachers. No. The outcome is the child learning. That is the outcome. So yes, we need all those other factors that will create the service, but we need to make sure that they're put together in a way that the service actually is delivered. And for that, you need the teachers that Shoriwa was mentioning. Exactly, those are the teachers that we need. But unfortunately, those are not the teachers that we have in all our classrooms in all our countries around the world. Why? Because unfortunately, many of the education decisions still are political decisions, right? In many countries, it's still who is a teacher, who is a principal, who is a bureaucrat in the Ministry of Education depends on political affiliation and whatever. You know well. Right? And that unfortunately happens in many of our countries. As long as the principal is appointed or assigned because of political considerations, then education will not be solved. The people in education, and education is about humans, is the element, the essential element. Technology can help, etc. But the people is essential. So we need that people that Shoriwa was mentioned. So we need to have meritocratic ways to bring people to education and never never use politics in order to take education decisions.
So I think that was great. I want to bring everyone, yes, absolutely. I want to bring all of our panelists in on this question. So access to education has been a widespread issue since before the pandemic, certainly predates it. We've never been able to get to scale. So what's missing? What do we need now? Why are you optimistic in this moment? Sean, do you want to go first?
I will go first. I'm seeing we've got 2 minutes left. I'll try to make it quick. So I think it's very difficult to say exactly what's missing, right? Because sometimes solving these problems can feel like playing a game of whack-a-mole, right? When you hit one mole and another one pops up on the other side, right? And it's not a matter of what's missing, but I think it's more of a matter of who's missing. If you look at our context in Africa, we're building a piece of technology that fits our context, and we're making it work within our context because a lot of the technologies that are out there were not built for our context. So instead of playing a game of whack-a-mole by yourself, imagine if there's 20 of you like whacking at the table at the same time. You have a higher chance of like hitting all of them, right? So I think collaboration and as well as funding, like I think accessing funding in Africa is so difficult. This may not be the same context may not be relevant for everyone, but I think funding is very important to actually push these technologies that are locally made and that are relevant to the local communities.
Anyone else want to weigh in on this question?
So what's missing and what makes us optimistic? Well, I think what's missing, to Jaime's point, is having the wherewithal. It's not just ministries of education. It has to be ministries of health, ministries of finance, to understand the return on investment, which I think there is no greater return on investment than education, including early education. And these crises are not going away. It's 100 million displaced today. Whether it's climate crises or conflict, I think the needs are going to continue to grow. What makes me optimistic is because I just think back a few years, I feel like we're talking about this in a way that more people are paying attention. When I think of what you're doing at the World Bank and others, I can't help but, being in these settings and hearing how passionate people are. I've been in so many meetings this week. That gives me hope because there are an awful lot of people who are working very hard to address this.
That's great. We need to
have,
end there.
You should have the last word.
Do you want to have the last word?
I know we're in overtime, but I can give the last word if you allow me. I would be cautiously optimistic because we have not necessarily shown, particularly during this pandemic, that we have a good understanding that education is the investment with the highest possible return, including early child education, and also is a right. Even if it were not a brutally high profitable investment, it's a right. Right, and despite that, despite knowing that, all early child education institutions were closed, and as time passed, there was no scientific argument, right, that will support that political decision, that policy decision. So that was a wrong policy decision. Then, as time passed, there was no reason to keep primary schools closed, and countries started opening bars, restaurants, malls, even offices, and schools were still closed. So is there an understanding, right, of the importance of education? Well, we haven't shown that. We didn't pass the test, I think, globally, with this pandemic, right? So now, do we now have a better understanding of the magnitude of the crisis? I think we have. And many young people are asking during this summit, right, will this stay in words, in blah, 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 blah? And my answer to them is, well, it depends. I cannot predict. It depends on what you do, right? If you put the right political pressure in your countries, no offense, but not in New York, in London, in Paris, where all these meetings that we go. In your countries, if you don't put political pressure in your countries to have an impact on education, then yes, it could stay in words. So it depends on you.
All right. Thank you to all of our panelists. I'm going to invite you all to go sit in the audience at some of the tables for the discussion. And now I'm going to transition us. Now I have the honor of inviting up Yasmin Sharif. Yasmin is the Director of Education Cannot Wait. She's going to give us remarks, but she has an exciting special announcement first. Welcome, Yasmin.
Thank you very much, Celine. Thank you. Thanks. So, hello, good morning. No, it's afternoon, right? You know, when we have this UN General Assembly week, you don't know time, space anymore. I hope I find my talking points. Anyway, it's wonderful to be here, and I would like to thank the Clinton Global Initiative for inviting Education Cannot Wait, which is the United Nations Global Fund for Education in Emergencies and Protracted Crises. Now, to Celine's promise of an exciting announcement. I feel very honored, especially since Education Cannot Wait has worked very closely to support education in Ukraine and also in Moldova. And I would like to acknowledge the presence of Her Excellency, the President of Moldova, Her Excellency Sando, who is here with us today as well. I visited Moldova just 3 months ago as we were investing in the refugee education. Let me reveal that Igor Klumenko, a 17-year-old Ukrainian student, has been announced as the winner of the Check.org Global Student Prize, run in partnership with the Varkey Foundation. This annual $100,000 award is given to one exceptional student that's made a real direct impact on learning and the lives of their peers and on society and beyond. From 7,000 applicants and nominations from over 150 countries, Igor selected as the winner. This incredible, brave young Ukrainian who was living in Kiev, he moved to the countryside at the start of the Russian aggressive invasion to finish his final year of high school. Sheltered in a basement of his new home, Igor successfully completed his studies while refining the landmine detecting drone he was been working on for the last 8 years. So please let us give a standing ovation. Igor, come. Is it now? Is it now? Is it now? It's now. It's now, right? I wonder now, yeah, so where are we going now? The video. Now is coming a video, and Igor will come back, and I'll come back after Igor. So I think, yeah, you're coming before me, okay? Well done, Igor. Yeah, you're coming up afterwards, they say. Is Igor coming now or afterwards? Yes. He's coming now. Come, Igor. And when I say Igor standing next to me, giving me strength, I have worked for the UN and civil society for over 30 years. And one thing I have learned, and I'm a strong woman, but the biggest strength I ever got in life was exactly from refugees, from people who suffer in conflict as refugees, climate-induced disaster. And Igor is just a manifestation of those people who have given strength and can give us all strength to change this world. And that's why we need the young people, the young generation. They're fearless, they are creative, and no one can beat you. So let me tell you a little bit what it looks like out there in conflicts and disasters. I spent most of my 30 years living across sub-Saharan Africa, in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, working with the Rohingyas in Bangladesh, also working with Venezuelan refugees in Colombia, in Ecuador. So when you spend almost a lifetime on that, it does shape you a lot. But it's really the hardest circumstances on earth. As somebody said, it's not the four walls that we are used to. And one thing that they taught me, the young people, the children and the youth, abnormal circumstances require extraordinary solutions, nothing less. And at Education Cannot Wait, this is our business, crisis, and to turn external solutions into a response. So we work in 44 countries around the globe. We invest resources and funding in order to improve quality education. It's not, as my World Bank colleague and Shireen and others have said, it's not just to walk in with a school bag or a book. It's about real holistic child-centered learning. And I'm so glad that we had the University from Arizona, and also, as Shireen spoke about, the importance of mental health, and especially the first 1,000 days of a child's development. But even beyond that, it's about realizing the human potential in each of these children. When we started Education Cannot Wait Global Foundation, one of Bill Clinton's, the former president, as we are standing here, good friends, was Gordon Brown. He was then the UK Prime Minister. And it is Gordon Brown who created Education Cannot Wait. There were 75 million children who were suffering in this kind of conflicts and crisis. As a result of COVID-19, new conflicts like Ukraine, a refugee population that is unprecedented since the Second World War, the Holocaust, now reaching 100 million, half of them children. As a result of all this, the number today, and we just came out with a new groundbreaking study from Education Cannot Wait, is 222 million children and adolescents who are living in these circumstances. Now it's an avalanche of misery. Their misery, and it's going to come back to our doorstep one day as well, if we don't act now. So let me conclude by saying this, and I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs in this room, and this is how you also pursue Education Cannot Wait. You need to be results-oriented. You need to see the whole picture, connecting dots. Connect dots. It's not a little piece here and piece there, and I think this was also mentioned. But it's also what Sean said when he was here. We need financing. We have mobilized $1.1 billion in just a few years, but how do you distribute that over 222 million? Do the calculation. It's not going to give them a holistic quality education. And we're working in very difficult circumstances. So I appeal to private sector, with your entrepreneurship, your results-driven, creativity, please join our 222 million dream movement. Education Cannot Wait, so we can continue to support them, and out of their resilience create not only extraordinary solutions but extraordinary young people that go out and change the world. If we invest in them and their humanity, we invest in our own humanity too. Thank you very much. Over to you, Igor.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Yasmin, for those very kind words. It's wonderful to be here at the Clinton Global Initiative and have a chance to speak to all of you. I'm so grateful to the Czech and the Warki Foundation for creating the Global Student Prize. In particular, I would like to thank Dan Rosenzweig and the Sunny Warki. It is a brilliant initiative that gives students a seat at the top table. After all, we need their dreams, their insights, and their creativity to rebuild our future. And I'm deeply humbled to receive this award today. But the truth is, everyone I know in my homeland is a hero who deserves to be recognized. And I dedicate this award to all of them. Mothers, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, sons, daughters. They are all doing extraordinary things. Many are on the front line risking their lives. Many are volunteering to prepare and deliver food. And many keep working to keep our country moving. But we are all fighting for our freedom. And we will be free. While so many Ukrainians have stories to tell, today I will tell you mine. When the missiles attacked Kyiv, my family and I fled to the countryside. The war has taken so much from all of us, but I could not let it take away my education. So I kept studying and completed my school years through virtual lessons. And let me say this, no child anywhere in the world should have their education taken away by war and conflict. Education is every child's birthright. Sheltering in basement, I became more determined than ever before to do what I could to help my people. So I worked day and night to develop drones that detect landmines remotely. Something I have researched 8 years before, since the 2014 Russian invasion of Crimea. And the more I learned, the more I realized the importance of education. With the right knowledge, I knew that I could make a difference. The working prototype, which has received 2 patents in Ukraine, detects anti-personnel and anti-vehicle landmines and provides coordinates of the location within centimeters. Because the device flies, it can spot mines without activating them. I'm now working on improving the drone, so we are now going to use artificial intelligence to identify the type of the landmine, spraying paint to mark the location, and then showing how to safely remove it. As we gather here today, there are 110 million landmines around the world. Unseen, unnoticed. These catastrophes look just beneath the surface, killing thousands of people every year. Since the invasion, I heard shots, the noise of planes and missiles. When I wake up, when I eat during the day, when I fall asleep, and while studying. I want to help my people and everyone affected by landmines, so that together we can breathe easy, go to our favorite city, and walk in woods or fields without fear of exploding a landmine. Education can teach us so much, but the greatest lesson I have learned is the importance of courage. If we all have courage, hold our hands, and move forward together, we can solve so many world's problems, not just the global and mining crisis, but climate change, global inequality, and pandemics. But there is something I cannot unlearn. War is really the worst of humanity. But education can bring out the best in people. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Igor, thank you for being here. You're an inspiration to everyone in the room. I also want to thank Yasmin for her great words. And now I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Her Excellency Maya Sandu, the President of the Republic of Moldova. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Allow me to congratulate Igor and to express appreciation for the bravery of the Ukrainian people. You are defending your country and the freedom of Ukraine. You are defending my country and the freedom of the Moldovans. You are fighting for the free world, and we appreciate very much. Ukraine needs our back and our support. Dear Clinton Global Initiative community, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation to speak in front of you today. Coming from a small country, it is true, a small country with a big heart, as our citizens' help to the Ukrainian refugees has shown to the world, makes the honor even more overwhelming. I'll try to share some thoughts and mostly harvest some ideas from you that could help us make a difference at home and in the world. I would like to build my arguments on two words: arrogance and diversity. One, arrogance is often the source of the bloodiest conflicts, while the other, diversity, can be the energy reservoir for the greatest developments our world has seen. And when these words, concepts, are used in the context of education, their power, destructive for one, inspiring for the other, is the more obvious. Ladies and gentlemen, precisely because of diversity that we shall encourage, education systems that work within the borders of a country might not be transposable to another country. Lecturing about what has been working for us, in my view, would only be proof of arrogance on my side. Thus, avoiding this and taking into account the creative power of the diversity that we have in this room, I would like to submit to your attention some elements that I believe are so fundamental that they transcend our differences. I hope they could create a solid basis for a common reflection, devoid of arrogance, while harnessing our diversity. Let me start with what I call the teacher's moral, intellectual, and behavioral authority. Young children and students learn also what their teacher is, not only what their teacher knows. Therefore, I am a strong believer in teacher quality. But the word quality here deserves a bit of detailing. Whereas the truth of science is the same across the world, and we must transfer this to our children, the moral and behavioral model is particular to each of us. In our very fluid world, I believe that young children need, above all, stalwart life models that appeal to kids within the framework of their own culture, ideally in a harmonious continuum between school and family. And my ambition is to help our teachers become the models that our society needs. So my first point would be, what should we do? How could we work together so as our teachers to be trained to be more than knowledge transmitters, to be equally moral, intellectual, and behavioral pillars of our societies? What policy tools could we use internationally to make out of the quality level of our teachers a relevant, measurable indicator of education perspectives? What global initiatives could we have for teachers? We often talk about student-centered education, seeing the educational system like a circle. Nothing prevents us from expanding this circle to an ellipse with two focal points: the students and the teachers, who cannot and will not function without each other. In this respect, I often wonder if it is just towards our teachers to consider them mere providers of educational services, or we shall endow them with a much deeper, transformative mission for our societies. A mission that serves the society not by the arrogance of "I know better," but through the inspiration and aspiration that, as a model, a teacher generates in the soul and in the mind of every child. The second discussion point that I would like to raise is about building ethical education systems. An ethical education system is, above all, an inclusive education system. an education system that empowers the children that can and want, but for various reasons did not have the best start in life. Ethics at a societal level fundamentals itself on the discerning power of each citizen. It is a generally accepted truth that facing the increased amount of information that all the citizens receive in the internet era, the discerning compass often loses the north, and our citizens are vulnerable to embracing false prophecies that bring discord instead of cohesion, regress instead of progress. Me, for one, I do not know a better source of discerning power than the conjugated influence of education through the intellectual, moral, and behavioral authority of the teachers, and the immutable foundations deeply rooted in our respective cultures. Inclusive education based on an ethical system that can only be built by trusted teachers that we, political leaders, empower within the framework of our own culture is, in my opinion, a strong commitment that could be common to all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me one more word about inclusiveness. Yes, every society will have front runners. Some are better off than others, some have more opportunities than others, and it is our duty, if we aim towards improved ethics, to encourage those that have the means to go higher, to go as high as they can. Yet, it is even more our duty to raise the level of those that did not have the same opportunities, but have the same aspirations, the same smile on their faces, the same creative energy, determination, and resolve. To conclude my few remarks, I convey to you my conviction that higher ethics and increasing societal trust in our teachers by endowing them with intellectual, moral, and behavioral authority are transcending elements that could be a basis for a decisive transformation of our education systems that would strengthen the cohesion of our societies. It is our mission, in my opinion, to leave to our children a more cohesive world, a world in which our children cooperate with each other, a world in which our teachers cooperate with each other, a world in which our diversity is the energy for peace, prosperity, innovation, and understanding, a world in which leaders talk about education, not about conflicts, and to do so by harnessing the inspiring elements of our diversity, knowledge, and wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Your words were inspiring to everyone, and I think they resonated with everyone in the room. Now is our table talk time. So if you take a look, you'll see that there are little things on your table that will guide your discussion. This is an opportunity for you to network, but in a theme-based way. So hopefully those little table ideas will guide you, and we'll come back together to share out a little bit at the end. We have about 25 minutes.